In Vietnam, American soldiers were fighting a war thousands of miles from home. But every soldier, every aircraft, and every bomb came with a price. And that price was beginning to threaten something far more powerful than a battlefield. The US dollar. By the late 1960s, America was spending enormous amounts of money on the Vietnam War. But Washington was also spending heavily at home. The result was a growing financial strain. More government spending meant more dollars entering the economy. And as the pressure increased, inflation became a growing concern. But here was the real problem. The dollar wasn't just America's currency. It was the foundation of the global monetary system. After World War II, Bretton Woods had placed the dollar at the center of international finance. Other major currencies were tied to the dollar. And the dollar was tied to gold. Foreign monetary authorities could exchange their dollars for US gold at the official rate. That promise was one of the reasons the world trusted the dollar. But there was a dangerous contradiction. America was creating more dollars, while the gold backing the system could not grow at the same pace. As more dollars accumulated overseas, foreign governments had a reason to question whether America's gold reserves could support the promise. Vietnam didn't single-handedly destroy Bretton Woods. But the war added enormous pressure to a system that was already becoming increasingly difficult to maintain. And by the end of the 1960s, Washington faced a problem that could no longer be ignored. The war was costing America money. The dollar was under pressure. And America's gold was becoming the ultimate line of defense. The question was no longer if the system was in danger. The question was, how long could America keep the promise? By the late 1960s, America had a problem that bullets could not solve. The United States was creating more dollars, while the world was demanding more gold. And that contradiction was hiding inside the very system that had made the dollar the world's most important currency. After World War II, Bretton Woods placed the dollar at the center of global finance. Foreign currencies were tied to the dollar. And the dollar was officially tied to gold. Foreign monetary authorities could exchange their dollars for American gold at the official rate. For years, this arrangement helped create confidence in the dollar. But by the late 1960s, the system was under growing pressure. America was running large government deficits. Inflation was rising, and the Vietnam War was adding another enormous financial burden. More dollars were flowing through the American and global economy. But America's gold reserves could not simply expand every time another dollar appeared overseas. That was the dangerous imbalance. Imagine millions of dollars sitting outside the United States. Each dollar represented a potential claim on American gold. As long as foreign governments kept those dollars, the system could continue. But if they started converting large amounts of those dollars into gold, America's reserves would come under increasing pressure. And that was exactly what began to happen. France became one of the most outspoken critics of the dollar-centered system and converted portions of its dollar holdings into gold. Other countries were watching. Washington was watching them. Because every conversion had the same effect. Dollars went out. Gold came out. The problem wasn't that America had suddenly run out of gold. The problem was that the relationship between dollars circulating around the world and the gold available to support the system was becoming increasingly difficult to maintain. The dollar had become incredibly powerful. But its greatest strength was creating a dangerous weakness. The more dollars the world accumulated, the greater the potential demand for America's gold. And now, the question was no longer whether the system was under pressure. It was how long the gold reserves could withstand the pressure. Because the next stage would be far more dangerous. The world was beginning to drain America's gold. By the early 1970s, the pressure was no longer hidden. The world had dollars. America had the gold. And some governments were increasingly willing to exchange one for the other. This was the nightmare built into the Bretton Woods system. The United States had promised that foreign monetary authorities could exchange dollars for gold at the official rate. But the amount of dollars held outside America had grown enormously. And America's gold reserves had been falling for years. The problem wasn't simply that the United States was losing gold. It was the growing gap between the dollars the world could present for redemption and the gold available to honor those claims. Washington tried to defend the system. But the pressure kept building. In 1968, The London gold pool collapsed after a rush for gold overwhelmed the attempt to stabilize the market. The international monetary system was showing cracks in public. Then came another warning. Foreign governments continued to watch America's economic policies, its deficits and its ability to maintain the dollar's gold commitment. Every time another country converted dollars into gold, the message became harder to ignore. Confidence in the system was weakening. And there was a dangerous possibility. What if more countries decided to do the same thing? It could become a chain reaction. Dollars would be presented. Gold would leave. America's reserves would shrink. And the credibility of the entire system would come under even greater pressure. By 1971, the situation had reached a critical point. President Richard Nixon and his advisors faced an impossible choice. Keep defending the gold dollar promise, or change the rules before the system broke on its own. Then, on August 15, 1971, Nixon went on national television. What he announced would shock the world. The gold window was about to close. August 15, 1971. America was about to break a promise that had held the international monetary system together for decades. President Richard Nixon appeared on television and announced a series of dramatic economic measures. But one decision mattered more than all the others. The United States would suspend the dollar's convertibility into gold for foreign monetary authorities. In simple terms, the gold window was closing. For years, the dollar had stood at the center of Bretton Woods. The world trusted the dollar because America had promised gold behind it. Now that promise was being suspended. Nixon presented the decision as necessary to protect the American economy. But this wasn't simply a decision about gold. It was a decision about American power. Washington was no longer willing to let foreign governments exchange unlimited dollars for America's gold under the old system. The rules had changed, and the shock was immediate. The old Bretton Woods system began to unravel. Yet something extraordinary happened next. Many expected the dollar to lose its credibility without its direct gold link. But the dollar did not disappear. America still possessed the world's largest economy. Its financial markets remained enormously powerful. And the dollar was already deeply embedded in international trade and finance. So Nixon had done something remarkable. He had removed gold from the foundation of the dollar, without removing the dollar from the center of the global financial system. The old monetary order was dying. But American monetary power was not. And this created the biggest question of all. If gold was no longer backing the dollar the way it had before, what would back America's financial power now? The answer would reshape the global economy. The gold window was closed. But the dollar didn't collapse. And that is where the story becomes even more interesting. For decades, gold had been at the heart of the Bretton Woods system. Now, the direct link was gone. The United States had changed the rules of the international monetary system. But America still possessed something incredibly powerful. The world's largest economy. Its financial markets remained enormous. American banks and corporations were deeply connected to global trade. And millions of businesses and governments around the world were already using dollars. The dollar had become more than a piece of paper backed by gold. It had become the center of a vast financial network. The Vietnam War had not single-handedly destroyed the gold standard. That would be too simple. The real story was a combination of pressures. War spending, domestic spending, inflation, international dollar accumulation, and growing pressure on America's gold reserves. Together, these forces helped push Bretton Woods toward its breaking point. And on August 15, 1971, Nixon made the decision that changed the rules. The gold window closed. The old monetary order began to disappear. But America's financial power survived. In fact, something remarkable happened. The United States was no longer promising to exchange every dollar for gold under the old system. Yet the world continued to use dollars. Because the dollar's strength increasingly came from something broader. Confidence in the United States, the size of its economy, the depth of its financial markets, and the dollar's role in global trade and finance. The war had helped expose the limits of the old system. Nixon's decision ended a crucial part of that system. But it did not end the dollar's global influence. America had lost gold as the dollar's direct anchor. It had not lost the dollar as a source of power. And that may be the most important lesson of 1971. The dollar survived without gold. And the world entered a new era of American financial power. But that raises one final question. If gold no longer stood behind the dollar, what exactly made the world continue to trust it? That is the story of the financial system America built after 1971.